You're listening to the Integrative Health Simplified podcast with Kari, Coody, pharmacist turned integrative health practitioner. Here we talk all things straightforward and honest when it comes to holistic health and simplifying your best steps forward while eliminating all the gimmicks and confusion. Leave the overwhelm at the door and get ready for impactful action steps that get to the real root of your issue and actually move the needle in your health. Let's dive into the show. Hey there, and welcome back into another episode of the Integrative Health Simplified podcast. My name is Kari, and I'm back with another common health misconception. We are in the middle of this series just talking about a good many of the misconceptions that can come from the health world. And today we're talking about cravings. And so in episode 12, this episode, we are going to talk about how if you have cravings, it's not necessarily that you need to just ignore them and that you feel bad for having them. It's really how we can use them as a compass, because I do feel like there's a common misconception as far as we feel bad whenever we crave certain foods. We just feel like we cheated or we just, fell off the wagon. There's a lot of different things that come up as far as like emotional things around cravings. And so I want to set the record straight that cravings are a compass for us. They can actually be a good thing. And it's not that you're a bad person if you crave certain foods, maybe even more certain times of the month. So let's kind of dig into this topic. So cravings are actually one of the best ways that we can tell if our system is in balance, right? It's kind of like I said, it's a good compass to see what is our body missing and how can we not only, maybe give it what it needs in the morning in a good way, but how can we work on some of the things that it's telling us in the long run to hopefully alleviate some of the things that we crave. So I'm not necessarily talking about chronic, unrelenting cravings. Now, that can really be a sign that something deeper is going on. But what I notice is a lot of restrictive diets tend to put emphasis on recreating healthy versions of the food their body is seeming to scream for. And so this is definitely part of my story. In a couple episodes ago, I was sharing that I've been on several different types of like restrictive ways of eating. And this was totally me. I was all about recreating healthy versions of the foods that like my body was telling me it wanted. And not that, that was part of my story. It served a purpose in the time. But now that I really just focus on getting enough nourishment through whole foods and enough calories on a daily basis, my cravings have significantly decreased. And it was just the fact of if I have a craving, I can pretty much satisfy it, let's say, in a few bites of something. I don't necessarily need to just keep eating and eating and eating like I did before. So, this also brings up the notion, should we indulge in every craving or whim that we have? Not necessarily, but it's really in our best interest to listen to what our body is telling us. This is what real intuition looks like. And that's really the goal, that we should be intuitive with what our body is trying to tell us. And so healthy cravings, the body craves certain things when it needs to keep itself in balance. And so once the need is met, the craving is satisfied and it goes away. Like that's a normal thing to happen. So for example, you might be desiring chocolate. You might be really craving some chocolate. Maybe you need some magnesium or copper, some extra of those nutrients. And having a few squares, you feel satisfied and you're able to move on. So that to me is more of a healthy craving, right? We are having that craving satisfied within just a few bites of something, and we're able to move on. We're not constantly obsessed with it. So I would say definitely in women, we're kind of going to be focusing on women today. That's the primary audience of this podcast. So common cravings that women have, especially in pregnancy and in different points of the menstrual cycle, they are really pointing to needs that our body wants to be met. They are not wrong or bad. So I'm going to actually give you some really specific examples so that you can see how you might need to really investigate, maybe look more into things for the long run. However, just know that these things aren't necessarily all bad. So let's go through a few of these. So salty foods. You're like, yes, that's me. I crave salty food. So that in my mind would trigger, do you need more high quality sodium? Is your body really deficient in sodium, which is something I see all the time on hair tests, HTMA, hair mineral tissue analysis that I run on clients. I see this in probably 95% of women. So this can signify that our adrenals are burnt out, and through sodium, that's really what it needs for fuel, right? Our adrenals really run primarily off of sodium and potassium as far as when we look at minerals. And so when we burn through that sodium, we're feeling stressed. We might be fasting. We might be eating low carb, pregnant, breastfeeding. Like, these are some reasons why our body might be running through sodium a little bit quicker. So high quality sea salt is a really great place to start. I have more salt options on my resource page on my website, which I will actually link in the description and the show notes of this episode. So that's salty. That's just kind of something to think about when you think, wow, I'm craving salty foods. There might be a reason for that. So next we have acidic or sour or like vinegar-based foods. This could be a really big indication of how our stomach acid and our digestion is, because sometimes when we crave things that are acidic or vinegary, it can be a sign that our digestion needs extra work. And so that is a little cue if you always want some salt and vinegar potato chips, or if you just really love to put vinegar on a lot of different things, if you just like sour foods, just kind of an indication. We're just kind of taking note on some of these things so that you can, the more you know, the more intuitive you can be with what your body is telling you. So next we have refined bread or baked goods. So this is definitely a big one. I love something like cakey or bready or something like that. I love those things. So whenever we are craving these things, it just should signify in our brain, do we need more carbs in the form of whole food carbs like fruits, root vegetables, fruit juices, squashes, properly prepared grains, legumes, things like that. This can really signify that our body is not getting what it needs in the form of carbs. And so we're just craving these quick carbs that our body can digest very quickly for glucose and for energy. And so if you tend to crave those things, you need to think about adding in more quality carbs throughout the day. And I think over time, your body will realize, oh, I'm getting what I need from these good whole food sources. I don't necessarily need as much of these quick fix type of foods. So that's a really big one for a lot of women, I know. So lean into that and think about how you can add in more quality carbs throughout the day and month and see if that really alleviates itself. So next we have sugary sweets. So if you struggle with this, which I know so many do, you should think to yourself, am I providing my body what it needs with carbs? Because these two are really connected. Again, these are like fruits, root veggies, fruit juices, squash, properly prepared grains and legumes, these types of really great carb sources for our body. So, also, are you allowing some natural sweeteners into your diet? So like honey, maple syrup, dates, coconut sugar. I'm not talking about going crazy with these things. However, our body uses these as an energy source. And so whenever we're getting very little carbs and very little natural sugars, our body's going to be triggered like, wow, I need some source of energy. So a lot of times we're going to crave those more sugary, refined, baked good type of, things that we want to grab, right? And so that's just a really big indicator of, I think I need to focus on getting more carbs into my diet. And it's just crazy how often I see with clients when I'm looking at their food journal, I'm going, okay, yes, they're getting protein, they're getting healthy fats. Where's the carbs? I think that we've just kind of been almost like subconsciously avoiding carbs, because I'll ask and they'll be like, oh, I didn't even realize that. So that's a really big thing that I see missing from a lot of clients when they give me what they're eating on a daily basis are quality carbs. So that might be something you really want to focus on. Okay, next we have fatty or fried foods. So if you tend to crave these things, whether it's all the time or just around your cycle or something, you might just want to consider, are you eating enough full fat, like high quality fat whole foods. So these are things like full fat dairy, ghee, butter, tallow, duck fat, fatty fish, coconut oil, quality olive oil, etc. Those are just some of the more common ones. Are you getting enough of those in your diet? Or are you eating a lot of low fat options and you're not necessarily cooking with the best fat choices either? Maybe you're using more refined oils. A lot of times you're going to crave these fattier foods because your body's like, hey, I need more fat. But again, most fried fatty foods are not going to be a great option because of the oil that they're fried in. So just think about how you can get more of these healthy fats and see if these cravings start to resolve themselves. Okay, I have two more for you. Are you always thirsty? So this is also one that I hear quite a bit. So if we drink plenty of water and it doesn't quench our thirst or it makes us feel like waterlogged, we should check to see if we're getting enough minerals. So this is one thing that I always like to check for, especially in a comprehensive client. I'm looking for, are there markers that signify dehydration? Because sometimes, we've been kind of taught to drink all of this water. So we're drinking a lot of water. However, it's not necessarily hydrating our cells because so many are deficient in sodium and potassium. So if we're not getting our enough minerals, then that is really going to affect how the water that we take in is actually hydrating our cells. So think outside of the box as far as like mineral rich beverages. These could be things like coconut water, even fresh fruit juices. Milk can be an amazing way to hydrate. I really like raw milk. Broths also, like bone broth, coconut broth, chicken broth. Things like that can be a great source. I have a lot of different hydration options for you. I'll link that blog post below. I actually talked about it in a previous episode, so I can link that for you as well. But I think that we have to consider if we're always feeling thirsty, and we can't really ever seem to quench our thirst. Likely that should be a trigger in your mind. Should be like, ding, ding, ding. I need to think about getting more mineral rich beverages and just minerals in general. So last but not least is craving junk food in general. Sometimes if we are literally just craving junk food, our body is screaming that it just needs more. It needs more energy. It needs more calories. It needs just more love and self-care, right? And sometimes it's, when we've only gotten into like energy rich, if we're only getting energy through junk food, it just craves junk, right? It's just like this cycle. And so usually eating enough and paying attention to the things that I've talked about above, before in this episode will really help. So junk food is something that we really feel very guilty for craving. And so I totally understand. A lot of my story goes from, I used to eat maybe conventional junk type of foods, maybe chips or cookies or things like that. But then as I've transitioned over the years, I just transitioned to healthier junk foods. But honestly, it took me a while to realize those are still very devoid of nutrients. And so even though I was eating a better chip, a better cookie, a better, X, Y, or Z, it still wasn't giving my body what it needed. And so again, it took me a while to realize, gosh, I'm eating a lot of these foods, but yet I don't really feel very nourished. I'm kind of craving some of these things and can't seem to get enough. And so if that's you, again, sometimes our body just needs more. Our body needs the adequate amount of calories and, in the form of energy so that it can run properly. And so nutrient-dense calories are the way to go, and you get that through whole foods. I'm not saying I never eat anything processed or any kind of junk food. Certainly, there are times that I do. I'm human just like anybody else. However, I don't feel like I crave them like I used to. So if you feel like, yes, that is me, then you just need to think and take note about how many calories you're getting in a day, how much of that is through whole foods. Are you getting enough carbs? Again, that's something I see a lot in women, that they're just not eating enough quality carbs. Take note of those things and see how you do. I think you'll see a big, big difference. And so I want to leave you this one example, which is really, really cool to think about how cravings really fall into your cycle as a woman. And so a lot of times we crave a little bit more sweet foods right before our cycle starts. And so this is actually a physiological response for our body needing more of that glucose, because glucose actually helps to raise insulin, which helps to raise progesterone levels, because progesterone falls quite drastically right before our cycle starts. And so to help with that drop a little bit, a lot of times our body will crave more sweet foods. And so another way that our body is very intuitive is that naturally, a lot of times we don't feel like working out, especially like really hard workouts, walking, not talking about walking. Walking's always good, but things like strength workouts, definitely something like a HIIT workout. Our body's not craving that right before our cycle because cortisol suppresses progesterone. And whenever we work out, our body does release cortisol. So again, these are things that are not bad things, right? We need to be listening to our body and work with our body's cravings. Cravings before our cycle can actually be a good thing. And these are examples of that. And so I hope that this just triggered something for you and you're like, man, this makes so much sense, because I really think if we know this information and we can listen to our body and what it's trying to tell us, we can really make huge shifts in our health. And this might seem like really simple things, but I believe really simple things can make a big difference in our health. So let me know what your thoughts are from sharing this information. If you really had an aha moment, I would love for you to share it on Instagram and tag me. I think we can do so much by just continuing this conversation and letting other women know about this information so that they can take steps to really listen to their body and to give it what it needs. Because when we give it what it needs, it really can thrive. So thank you for being with me with this episode. I am excited to continue this series with a few more common health conceptions. So tune into the next episode. See you guys. If this episode has served you in any way, I would love it if you'd share any aha moments or takeaways over on Instagram and tag me at Kari Coody. And if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button so we can continue to learn and grow together.